Supervisor Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've heard from a lot of colleagues today on why they don't support Hector. Just want some of the things that I think about this appointment to be on the record, so that when people are learning about our government and this process and what we all thought here today, there's some additional information there for them. First of all, I would note that amongst many others that I will not list, Hector Colon's reappointment has the support of District Attorney John Chisholm, the MMAC, former Democratic Governor Jim Doyle, the Wisconsin Center for Performance Excellence, the American Public Human Service Association, the Milwaukee Urban League, who I would note is led by Ralph Pullman, former director of the department that Hector Colon now leads, Disability Rights Wisconsin, the United Community Center, and the list goes on. I have joined the Health and Human Needs Committee in asking pointed questions of Director Colon and the people that report to him. I am in agreement that the county board needs more information, better information, faster, more. But admitting that we need more information doesn't necessarily place blame for not receiving it. I was appalled to see press releases come out from our very own department claiming that Director Colon's decision to not immediately inform the Health and Human Needs Committee of horrendous and inhumane conditions at Lincoln Hills was somehow valid or even an error that could be pinned on Hector Colon. What we do know, now that we've received subsequent reports and we've seen a document trail to some extent, is that Hector Colon, as director of the department, informed the county board within 12 hours of receiving new information. Did we want it in 4 hours? Did we want him to pick up the phone and call us immediately? To some degree, I think that we can be reasonable in agreeing that we want to make sure we're getting accurate information. I can say I don't want Hector to pick up the phone or fire off an email to me that is so brash and so quick that as an elected official I will get incorrect information or to jump the gun. I want it to be accurate. And I would say informing us 12 to 24 hours after the fact on the type of information we received and with what our duties, responsibilities, and interests were, 12 to 24 hours was actually pretty reasonable. I would point out that while Hector has been the director and in this position, we've seen a reduction in chronic homelessness by 70% since July 2015 in Milwaukee County. We've seen what was a $14.8 million deficit turn into essentially a $17 million plus surplus. We've had a 35% reduction in emergency detentions. Emergency detentions have so much of an effect on our community and on our society and on how people can move on with their lives when they have mental health issues, and to be able to validly use best practices and reduce it by not 2 or 3%, which is what some government agencies struggle to do to make a small impact, but 35%. That's huge. It's important. It's impactful. We've had a 30% decrease in the processing time for persons with disabilities receiving long-term support. We've created over 400 new supportive housing units for our community's most vulnerable. And I would add, when we're talking about long lines and in-community access points for receiving county services, maybe that's a reflection of the popularity and some of the need in our county for services to be provided, not at some central location, not necessarily at the courthouse where you have to go through security or pay for parking, but to be able to put access points in the community and tell people, look at the variety of days and times and locations that you can come and sign up or receive for this service. So maybe there's been some bumps in the road. That's true. How could we expect any director of this department, of the county's biggest department, and the one that pertains to humans and our society with all of its imperfections, could we expect for that job to be done without some bumps in the road? There's not going to be a perfect director ever before Hector. with Hector or after Hector. But I think that Hector has done a commendable job. I think that it is to Milwaukee County's benefit for him to stay the director of this department. And I think that we have to also draw attention to the fact that our discontent with what's gone on at Lincoln Hills, it's valid. We have a right to be angry. Our constituents have a right to be angry about Lincoln Hills, but I'll tell you what, Hector Colon does not run Lincoln Hills.
All right.
Hector Colon
Need to keep the noise from the gallery down.
Hector Colon started before this board was actively involved in pursuing options for our youth and the problems at Lincoln Hill. Hector Colon and his staff were already on it pursuing options and looking at what are the possibilities. When this county board and its committees said, my gosh, look at what's going on at Lincoln Hills, we've got to sever that contract, we've got to withdraw, we've got to get our youth out of there, we have to have more options, we gave direction and said, Hector and to his staff, go find the options and figure out how we can do something different that will be a good alternative for our youth. What happened? We saw some immediate results at our direction. They were not only working on it, but they followed our immediate direction. And they sent a letter to the state saying, we're going to be severing our operations going forward. You know, I've alluded sometimes in past comments today that sometimes people's hands are tied when they work within government. And as much as I've seen Director Colon's hands tied, I'll tell you, he's been able to muscle and loosen some of the restrictions and red tape we've seen around his hands to make progress in some of these areas. So is it true that he doesn't have unilateral ability to pull kids out at Lincoln Hills? Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. We have some red tape around all of our hands. But from what I've seen between his leadership and the people that are following under his direction in that department, they're working their way through that red tape, they're loosening it up, and they're getting to the point where they can get a hand free and make some progress on our behalf. Speaking about Hector Colon's staff, if we don't confirm Hector Colon today, and he is no longer employed as the director of this department, I have to ask what will happen going forward. Would the county executive put in an interim? Would there be some kind of an emergency appointment? Would that be someone external? Would we do one of these nationwide searches to find somebody qualified and educated? Or would someone perhaps reporting directly to Hector now be promoted into that position? The answer right now is actually irrelevant, but what I see happening in all of those situations is you have bureau directors or division administrators that report to Hector currently that all of a sudden don't have a leader, all of a sudden don't have any direction. We've experienced this problem where we've seen a vacancy go for 12 months or 18 months before without finding a candidate to put in it. So one of the questions that I would ask we at least consider is continuity of the organization. And while I don't like the idea that we're doing what they're calling a compromise with a 2-year reappointment, I would love to support a 4-year reappointment of Hector Colon and would stand by that. I'm willing to do it because I see that it's important for the continuity of operations and the safety of our citizens. I've heard a lot about the balance of power, and I understand it's a valid concern for this board and for the interests of our government going forward. But the reality is, balance of power has very little to do with whether or not Hector Colon should be reconfirmed. Struggles between county board and county executive with power or changing laws in Madison has very little to do with this confirmation. When we talk about balance of power, we have a situation where elected officials have said, you know, I could go either way, I'm 50-50, kind of indifferent. Let's see how Hector treats me today. Those aren't the reasons that we make decisions on whether or not in a position this important is reappointed or not. We don't make hiring and firing decisions based on that kind of information or that kind of attitude. And I'm confident that that kind of attitude is eradicated here today. Regarding what's been called dark money ads, the question's been asked, are you trying to put pressure? What are you trying to pay somebody off to do? Are you trying to buy a vote and get things moved around? Haven't we ever heard of freedom of speech? Haven't we ever heard of citizens taking their own initiative to make sure that fellow citizens are informed? I understand if we don't like what was in the ads. I get that. But maybe the involvement there isn't a tit for tat, a pay for play, this is why somebody wants to put out these ads. Maybe it's simply about somebody having the opinion that they want to do the right thing and to see us at county government do the right thing. So I know it's a controversial issue. I see heads shaking and eyes rolling, but these are things that needed to be said. They needed to be on the record. And I would just end my opinion on this item by saying, I hope that we do not admire the way the Queen of Hearts did business, looking for anybody's head to roll when she was angry. Because if our way of doing business is to say, we're mad about Lincoln Hills and a head has to roll, that's not the right way to lead this county. If you have legitimate concerns about Hector and the way that he has led the department, fine. But let us not be hasty and make somebody's head roll just because we can.